Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Holacek, and welcome to the fifth Sentimental Traveler lecture on Thomas Jefferson. This one is titled Art Appears Too Much, Thomas Jefferson's Quasi-Aristotelian Conception of the Fine Arts. Thomas Jefferson writes to John Bannister in a 1785 letter of the many disadvantages, to enumerate them all, he says, would require a volume of sending an American youth to be educated overseas. There are pluses to European education, among them being acquisition of a just taste in the fine arts, more particularly those of painting, sculpture, architecture, and music. That point he iterates to Charles Bellini, September 30, 1785. Writes he, "Were I to proceed to tell you how much I enjoy European architecture, sculpture, painting, music, I should want words. It is in these arts they shine." While traveling through southern France and northern Italy, he observes to lawyer and good friend George Wythe in 1787, "In architecture, painting, sculpture, I found much amusement." Appreciation for European art, however, isn't a desire to imitate Europeans. Jefferson's aesthetic vision for America, he tells James Madison in 1785, is a welding together of what is beautiful and what is practical, hence preference for gardens and architecture to painting and sculpture. When touring the gardens of England, he continually carps at the excessive luxury, too much art and too many useless garnishments. In traveling notes from Mr. Rutledge and Mr. Shippen, Thomas Jefferson lists agriculture, mechanical arts, lighter mechanical arts and manufactures, gardens and architecture, ahead of painting and statuary. He advises study of European gardens with the proviso that America will cut out the superabundant plants. He advises especial attention to architecture. It is among the most important arts, says he, because of rapid American populational growth, the American tendency to build with perishable materials, and the need to, he says, introduce taste into art which shows so much. That's in a letter to James Madison in 1785. Painting and statuary are too expensive for the state of wealth among us, he continues. It would be useless and preposterous for us to make ourselves connoisseurs of those arts. They are worth seeing but not studying. Thus, Jefferson's focus is on useful beauty. America is not to be a plushy, not to be a lavish country. Extravagance is undesirable because aesthetic indulgence works against Jefferson's Republican political reforms and moral aims. Aesthetic indulgence, too much art and too many useless items, is a luxury in which only the wealthy can indulge, and such indulgence comes at the expense of the unwealthy majority, the hoi polloi. Jefferson's political reforms and moral aims are targeted at an equitable distribution of wealth that does not privilege the well-born or the wealthy. His aim is to allow for a rough equality of opportunity where virtue and talent, not wealth and good birth, are rewarded. The notion that aesthetical indulgence works against Republican government, what I call the paradox of aesthetic cultivation, was a sentiment at the time shared by many other Americans of Republican bent. He writes to John Adams writes to his wife in 1774, "The more elegance, the less virtue in all times and countries." Though the arts were capable of refining taste and enhancing understanding, they could also, if overdone or badly done, seduce, betray, deceive, deprave, corrupt, and debauch. Thus, overcultivation of aesthetic sensibility could readily lead to political instability and moral obliquity. Overcultivation is also indicative of undue wealth and luxury, and thus, in keeping with the four-stage theory of social maturation accepted by many at the time, the shift from hunting-gathering stage to herding to farming to urbanism, symptomatic of social decay. Investigation into Jefferson's conception of the beautiful and the sublime in his writings show one key feature. Linkage of beauty to economy indicates that beauty is foremost a sort of fitness for Jefferson. It is an ultra fitness or extreme fitness. Compare the French maxim, je me sublime, I exceed myself, where exceeding is not superfluity, but working to fullest potential. comparable to the aesthetic fitness of aestheticians William Hogarth and Edmund Burke, that is Aristotelian in essence. Turn to Aristotle. Aristotle believes that techne, which could be translated as art or craft, in the productive sense is important only insofar as the end at which one aims is successfully achieved. The agent, thinks he, contributes nothing to the excellence of the product, inasmuch as the excellence of the product lies in the product itself, not the producer. Thus the excellence, what Aristotle calls the edity, of the producer is of the physical, not ethical sort. And so the formal cause, the essence of what is produced, its definition or its function, is superior to the productive or efficient cause, the actions of the craftsman in producing the object. Moreover, the final cause, its telos, is superior to the formal cause, insofar as the final cause is the actualization of the essence of a thing. A double axe, by essence, a chopping thing, is more of a double axe when it is actualized. In other words, when it is chopping and when both sides of the axe are used, than when it is resting in a shed. For Aristotle, to be, in the fullest sense, is to do, and real beauty lies in doing. But Jefferson was no Aristotelian, far from it. He regarded such metaphysical analysis as taradiddle. Yet he agreed with Aristotle that the true beauty of a thing crafted is not so much mere recognition of the essence of the thing, but the actualization of the thing crafted, viz., the use to which it could be put. Thus, there could be no real beauty without functionality. For Jefferson, utility is the test of real beauty, writes Horace Callan in a paper titled The Arts in Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wanted beauty to come to some use and aesthetic experiences to work out in moral consequences. Otherwise, they are a luxury. Jefferson scholar Merrill Peterson, in his brilliant work, The Jefferson Image in the American Mind, agrees. Writes he, Jefferson prized beauty for what it could do, for its place in the future scheme of things, which he contemplated with the same fervor as the metaphysician contemplates the cosmos or the sentimental dreamer the picturesque past. Thus, beauty that does not help, shelter, clothe, feed, or protect is a needless luxury, a sign of an overindulgent, dissipative society. Thus, Jefferson's approach to beauty is prudential, Banausic. Beauty for Aristotle also had a moral function. The techni, it's plural of techne, art or craft, are three and axiologically ranked. From lowest to highest, there are productive science, which is knowledge for the sake of some produced end, political science, knowledge for the sake of political ethics included fulfillment, and theoretical science, which is knowledge for its own sake. Productive science, poetike techne, the lowest but the closest thing Aristotle has to the fine arts, is not without an important function. Of poetics, categorized as a productive science, a science that where the acts are for the sake of some end, Aristotle writes in Poetics, poetry is an imitation, a mimesis, with the media of rhythm, words, and melody that represents characters who are better than, equal to, or inferior to most, and that uses narration or dramatic action in the manner of imitation. End of the quote. Imitation is educative. We learn through imitation. A good poet uses the right guidelines to bring about catharsis, which is an emotional expurgation that is morally illustrative. In tragedy, one expurgates through pity and terror, in comedy through laughter. Catharsis through imitation of characters on stage, ta ethi, is expurgation through identification. Through pity, terror, or laughter, children identify emotionally with an actor and learn to deal similarly with their own emotions in similar contexts. Potentially magnanimous children learn most by tragedy. Ordinary children find delight in pasquinade. The learning is moral training, as right action for Aristotle involves not just right thinking and choice, but allows for proper display of emotional impulses. A good poet, then, knows fully well the human condition. Jefferson thought likewise, need for a proper moral cultivation is aesthetic cultivation. In a 1771 letter to Robert Skipwith, he notes that acts of charity and gratitude through recognition of their beauty incite emulation. Acts of atrocity, being deformed, invite repulsion. Writes Jefferson, every emotion of this kind is an exercise of our virtuous dispositions, and dispositions of the mind, like limbs of the body, acquire strength by exercise. But exercise produces habit, and in the instance of which we speak, the exercise being of the moral feelings produces a habit of thinking and acting virtuously. Jefferson adds, if the painting be lively and a tolerable picture of nature, we are thrown into a reverie, from which we wake as a better person. He appeals to Shakespeare, Ravaillac, Marmontel, and Sterne. Thus, fiction is preferable to history because the moral lessons of history are too infrequent to incite in any high degree the sympathetic emotion of virtue. In fiction, the field of imagination is thus laid open to our use, and lessons may be formed to illustrate and carry home to the heart every moral rule of life. Thus, for Jefferson, there's a significant link between the aesthetic and moral senses, the substratal principles of each discoverable through empirical investigation of the nature of man. The aesthetic sense is at day's end answerable to the moral sense, though it is, he's clear, a separate faculty. If you'd like more on Thomas Jefferson in the fine arts, you can go to my webpage, www.thomasjeffersonphilosopher.com, and there I have many essays on Thomas Jefferson, and this essay is there for you to download and read. You can learn more about me too. Thank you.